DJ Scream, heavy in the streets.
We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood. We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood.
Good mix.
Get it out the mud.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And this evening, we are back. We are back this evening with some more appetizers. And it was just 3 weeks ago when we had UFC 316, but we're having some more mixed martial arts just 3 weeks ago. And now we're going to have UFC 317. Topuria versus Oliveira, and that's Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira for the men's lightweight championship, and that's a vacant belt as well. I believe what is his former champion vacated the belt, so. So Islam Makhachev, I guess he vacated the belt so he could move up to the welterweight and try to compete for a welterweight. Kind of similar what Ilia Topuria is doing, moving up from featherweight to lightweight. So very similar what they're doing in that regard. But this is a UFC 317 Topuria versus Oliveira, and this is June 28th, 2025 at the T-Mobile Arena in Paradise, Nevada, United States, and that should be your standard pay-per-view time, 10 Eastern, 9 Central time. And let's just kind of go over the prelims a little bit. The prelims don't have too many notable names, but there's a couple interesting fights on that card to kind of get you build up for the curtain jerker between the bantamweights, Peyton Talbot versus Felipe Lima. But on the prelims, you got on the early prelims, you have the main highlighter for that would be the first fight on the card. The prelims all together is a heavyweight bout. So you guys know me, if you've been following this podcast long enough, you know I love a heavyweight bout. There needs to be some beef. There needs to be some beef on any card, regardless if it's early prelims, standard prelims, or the main card. Like, there needs to be some heavyweight. I want to see the opportunity, at least once in a card, to see someone's head just get completely knocked off by just the beef that you get from the heavyweight division. And you get that in the first fight on the card is a heavyweight bout between Jonathan Dienz versus Alvin Hines. And so that's the first fight on the card. And then the main event, there's only two. The early prelims are kind of falling apart a little bit, just regard to the amount of fights that are on the early prelims and then the standard prelims. So there's only 2 fights on the early prelims, but on your main event of the early prelims, you do have a welterweight bout between Nico Price versus Jacob Smith. So Nico Price is a notable enough name. And then once you get to the preliminary cards, there aren't too many real noticeable names on the first 3 fights on the prelim card. But then on the main event of the preliminary card, you do have a middleweight bout between Jack Hermason versus Gregory Rodriguez. So that should be really good. Those are some good fights and good weight classes to follow for just the early prelims and then the preliminaries. Like, that's a good main event for the prelims, Jack Hermason versus Gregory Rodriguez. But anyways, let's get into the main card here, because it's a pretty good card. I felt like last card, UFC 316, it just kind of fell into place with just like all the predictions and picks. They all just went like kind of like the way you expected them to go, or the way I expected them to go, because I was right on every single fight pick on the main card. Not necessarily all the methods, but all but maybe like two of the five fights. I got the fight pick right and the method right. So it'd be hard to do better than that on this card. And this feels like a card that's a little bit harder to pick in regards to like go perfect on the card and go perfect on the picks and perfect on the methods like this. It seems like there's a lot more like coin flip type matches here on the main card. But anyway, let's get into the main card here. This is a UFC 317 Topuria versus Oliveira. So can I get a menu? And so first fight on the card, I think we mumbled across it a little bit, just mentioning the first fight on the card. We have a bantamweight bout between Peyton Talbot versus Felipe Lima. So Talbot, I think most people consider him like more of like a striker, likes to stand, but he does have Brazilian jiu-jitsu and has a grappling game, but I think prefers to stand. Tries that striking. Really likes to be in that orthodox stance and really likes to play off that jab. And in his last five fights, he is 4-1, and so he had won four straight fights. Yeah, so he won his first four fights in the UFC, and then he lost his most recent fight against Ronnie Barcelos. He lost that at UFC 311, January 18th, 2025, by unanimous decision. So Peyton Talabot obviously wants to get back on track and get a win here. And in his 10 matches, he has 9 wins with just the one loss, and then in the 9 wins, 7 of them have come by knockout. So that's definitely from the striking that he likes to impose, and if he gets someone on their toes and backpedaling and stuff, maybe leads to some stoppages with some just the ends of some fights with some ground and pound. But like I said, most of that wants to try to go for the knockout and beat you with the striking, and then has 1 win by submission and 1 by decision, and the 1 loss is just the one by decision. So Peyton Talabot, I would imagine that he's the favorite in this fight, but just because he was kind of a hot commodity, a hot contender there for a little while, just because he's on the 4-fight winning streak, getting submissions and getting knockouts, and then kind of halted his progression a little bit with that loss to Ronnie Barcelos. But he is fighting. He is fighting fellow. Let's see, yeah, fellow bantamweight contender and Felipe Jungle Boy Lima, who I believe he's kind of a similar in regards, like he likes to try the striking, but he has good grappling as well. A little more mixed, a little more mixed of a martial artist than Peyton Talbot is. Felipe Lima is, and he's what, just 2-0 in the UFC. So he's had two fights in the UFC where he's gotten a submission and then just a win by unanimous decision. But if you go 5 fights back, he is 5-0, and you could go, yeah. So he lost his first fight of his career to Ivan Luiz, but since then, back all the way in October 29th, 2015, he is undefeated. So he's won 14 straight fights. So that's pretty impressive. And in those 14 wins, he has 4 wins by knockout, 3 wins by submission, and 7 by decision. So it's just kind of showing it's a pure mixed martial artist. He can knock you out, he can submit you, or he can go the distance. He can survive and go the distance. And then in the 1 loss, he has never been knocked out, and then got submitted the 1 time, and then never gone to decision. So pretty impressive, honestly, in that regard. So let's see. So we have Peyton Talbot versus Felipe Lima. Kind of different. Their resumes or records are kind of different. Like Peyton Talbot won his first 9 fights and then lost his most recent fight, and then Felipe Talbot lost his first fight and then won his next 14 fights straight. So in this bantamweight bout between Peyton Talbot versus Felipe Lima, I think I'm going to go with Felipe Lima to win this, just because I got more trust and backing in the 14 fight winning streak than I do with the guy coming off his first loss of his career, and just because it seemed like the step up in competition for Felipe Lima kind of led to that most recent unanimous decision victory over Miles Jones. I find it hard to believe that Felipe Lima will get the stoppage on Peyton Talbot, but I do believe he's going to get the win. I trust the 14 fight winning streak instead of the guy that was on a 9 fight winning streak and then just lost his most recent fight. So in the bantamweight bout, the curtain jerker of UFC 17, bantamweight bout between Peyton Talbot versus Felipe Lima. I'm going with Felipe Lima, and I think he's going to win this by decision. All right, now then, on to lightweight bout between Beneil Dariush versus Renato Moicano. And so you've heard a little bit of back and forth between these guys trying to like call one another an old man. I think there's maybe just like what was it, just like a couple days or like a couple months difference between these guys. Yeah, Renato Moicano was born May 21st, and Beneil Dariush was born May 6th, 1989. So it's just like 2 weeks difference between the two. But hearing them call each other old man is kind of funny. But both of these guys are like grapplers, submission grapplers, jujitsu grappling and submission. And Beneil Dariush had a little bit of tough go of it his last 5 fights, because he's 3-2 in his last 5 fights, but his last 2 fights have been losses, and he's been stopped by TKO and knockouts in those 2 bouts. But it was against the highest level of the division, of lightweight division here, because you got back at UFC 289, he lost by TKO punches in the first round at the 4:10 mark of the first round to Charles Oliveira, who's literally fighting for the vacant lightweight belt tonight. So, you can take that loss with a grain of salt. And then you got Arman Sarukian, who's also been a title contender. He's fought for the lightweight belt, so that's an impressive opponent that he's fought there and lost to as well. And he's ranked 14th. I'm a little surprised that he's not ranked higher than that, and that he's ranked 9th. That almost doesn't seem like that should be correct. But anyways, he lost him just two knockouts, a knee and punches to Arman Sarukian at the 104 mark of the first round, and that was all the way. So he's had quite a long layoff here, about a year and a half layoff here for Beneil Dariush. So I'm not a huge fan of that. He hasn't fought since December 2nd, 2023. So I'm not a huge fan of fighters that take off more than a year hiatus, depending on if it's a injury or for personal reasons. But in his 29 matches, he's had 22 wins, 6 losses, and 1 draw. In the 22 wins, he's had 5 wins by knockout, 8 wins by submission. So most likely, if he's going to get to the stoppage, it's going to be by some type of submission, a neck or getting a hold of an arm. And then he's gone the distance 9 times with the win. And then in the 6 losses, he's been knocked out 5 times. So that's a big highlighter. Maybe it's a good thing that Moicano is more of a grappler submission opponent for him than anything. So, because it's definitely shown over Benel Dariush. He doesn't have a lot of losses in his career, but most of them have come by knockout with 5 knockouts. And then in the one loss, to make a total of 6 losses, he's lost once by submission as well. Never gone the distance in the draw. So yeah, the long layoff there and the fact that he's shown that his chin has been a little bit little suspect, a little suspect his chin has been. I'm guessing that's probably why he took that year and a half off after getting knocked out by Arman Sarukian, is to maybe see if his chin could heal and get back. But so that's kind of lucky for him. He's fighting Renato Moicano, who is more of a grappler, submission artist in himself. So these are kind of fighters that are similar in age and kind of similar in record, and uh, similar fighters. It'll be interesting to see who's better in the striking game and who kind of decides to go for the takedown first. But Renato Moicano, he is 4-1 in his last 5 fights. So he was on a 4-fight winning streak, and then in his most recent uh, fight where he fought for the UFC lightweight championship, but just got completely dominated by Islam Makhachev and only lasted for the 4:05 mark of the first round. Back at UFC 11, got choked out by a Barbaro choke. So besides that, before running into uh, a, a bullet train like Islam Makhachev, running into a straight brick wall, Renato Moicano looked like he was on the fast track to possibly be the next lightweight champion, which an impressive victory here could maybe get him back in line to where maybe he's uh, uh, an alternate for possibly fighting for the lightweight championship on maybe the next card that the belt's on the line, or maybe he just needs to win one more and then he's facing Charles Oliveira or Ilia Topuria after tonight. So that's definitely something interesting to follow there. I would say he's definitely been a lot more active than Benel Dariush. And so in his 27 fights, he's had 20 wins, 6 losses, and 1 draw. In the 20 wins, he's had just 2 wins by knockout, 10 by submission, which is very impressive. That shows you the grappling, the Brazilian jiu-jitsu, the submission grappling game that he has. And then eight wins by decision, so he can go the distance as well. And then in the 6 losses, he's also been knocked out 3 times himself and submitted twice. So he can be finished just like uh, uh, Dariush, Benal Dariush. He can be finished as well. And then 1 loss by decision, and then the draw. So I'm going off of this just because of Benel Dariush having been on a year hiatus, and I imagine a lot of that has to do with his suspect jaw. He was wondering if his jaw had turned to powder, turned to dust, or his glass, and maybe maybe it's better now with the time taken off. But I'm going with the more active fighter, and the fighter that just recently in his last fight fought for the belt, title contender, and Renato Moicano. So in this lightweight bout between Benel Dariush versus Renato Moicano, I'm going with Renato Moicano to win this. And I'm not picking him to win by knockout like would be the easiest thing, uh, path to victory, you would think, would be try to get the guy that's shown that he's been a little suspect and his last 2 fights been getting knocked out. He's gonna win the ground game between these two great grapplers, and he's going to beat Benel Dariush, and he's going to submit him, because I think maybe Benel Dariush may be too worried about protecting his chin in the striking game, or even when he maybe gets a couple shots on ground and pound, he may leave his neck out there, or maybe leave his arm out there while he's trying to defend. Possibly, I don't know whether he thinks it is or if it is. His least recent history has shown a little bit of a suspect jaw from Benel Dariush, but I think he's going to end up maybe putting too much effort into avoiding those kind of strikes, either standing or on the ground, to where he leaves something open to where Renato Moicano going to be able to grab onto it and add his 11th submission victory over Benel Dariush. All right, now then, on to the third bout on the card. We have a flyweight bout between Brandon Royval versus Joshua Vaughn, and uh, I believe this. I haven't seen this on every note, but I've heard it. I think I've heard it from during the press conference, the pre-fight press conference. Uh, Dana White mentioned Brandon Royval versus Joshua Vaughn as the title eliminator bout between the two. So that should be really interesting, especially considering Brandon Royval, like really the only fights that he's lost have been for the belt basically. Uh, yeah, so he lost to Pantoja, kind of like Renato Moicano, his last fight that he's lost in the last 3 years or so has just been to Alexander Pantoja when he was fighting for the flyweight belt. But since then, uh, besides that, just all wins and submissions and decisions, just a wide variety of victories coming from Brandon Royval with his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai striking style versus Joshua Van, who's ranked all the way down as like the 12th flyweight. So this would be a huge win for him if he was able to beat Brandon Royval, who's ranked like number one, and he's got Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu submission type style himself, but also likes the striking. Has shown that he has some knockout capability, even at the 125-pound range. But Brandon Royval, like I said, he's basically this has been he's been pretty successful. Besides any times he's actually had to fight for the belt, so he's number one as number one flyweight at the moment. So he's fought for the belt not that long ago. So he's 4-1 in his last 5 fights. The one loss was to Alexander Pantoja, where he lost a good fight to Alexander Pantoja by unanimous decision back at UFC 296, December 16th, 2023, and that was a 5-round fight for the flyweight championship. But he's won 2 in a row since then. Beat Brandon Moreno and Tassura Turak. But those were not overly impressive wins just because they were both split decision. Even the Tassura fight was a fight of the night, but both of those fights were split decision. But before that, hell, he was on a 3-fight winning streak, which led up to his fight against Alexander Pantoja. But in his 24 fights, he has 17 wins with 7 losses. In the 17 wins, he has 4 wins by knockout, 9 wins by submission, and four wins by decision. So you got kind of like with the knockouts, you got the style, his fighting style of the Muay Thai, but also the submission game of the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. And then in his 7 losses, he's had 1 loss by knockout, and then 1 by submission, and 5 by decision. So this is like a big matchup, really. Like this is a big opportunity for Joshua Van, who's only 23 years old, and like I said, he's only ranked the 12th ranked flyweight, and this could be a title eliminator for him. So this is a huge opportunity for him, who also is has like a kickboxing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu style, likes to strike, has recently tapered off a little bit recently from his early on success, having a lot of knockouts and TKOs early in his career, like 3 years ago or so. But slowed down a little bit since then. But in his last 5 fights, he's 4-1 with just the 1 loss being to Charlie Jones, where he got KO'd back on July 13th, 2024 at the 22nd mark of the 3rd round. But since then, he's won 3 straight fights, with 3 of them being decision, and then a TKO punches win over Bueno Guastavio da Silva. TKO punches at the 401 mark of the 3rd round at UFC 316. So he literally just fought, which is wild. So he just fought on the last pay-per-view. Have been less than a month when he's fought. So that's crazy. Him picking up this opportunity coming right off of a fight. So I don't know what they say in regards to like, oh, he didn't have a full fight camp. I guess he didn't technically have a full fight camp for who he's fighting in Brandon Royval, but you definitely can't say that he wasn't. And he should be in shape regardless of that fight camp. How long he had to prepare, but also Brandon Royval didn't have but what 3 weeks to prepare for him. He was maybe preparing for someone else, so he's in shape, but wasn't preparing for him. So I look at that as kind of a wash. But he's won 4 in a row in his 16 matches. He has 14 wins with 2 losses. In the 14 wins, he has 7 wins by knockout, 2 wins by submission, and 5 wins by decision. In those 2 losses, he's been knocked out once and been submitted once. So, like I said, this is like a huge opportunity for Joshua Vaughn, but Brandon Royval, he may be maybe too much for him to handle. And so, let's see. So in this flyweight bout between Brandon Royval versus Joshua Vaughn, I think both of these guys are pretty good uh, fighters. You know, neither one of them have been stopped a whole lot in their career. Brandon Royval has only been finished twice, and Joshua Vaughn's only been finished twice as well. But I understand like this is a big step up in competition for him. But I think he's going to prove, even if he doesn't beat Brandon Royval, I think he's going to prove that he belongs in that like top 10 echelon of the flyweight division. But in this flyweight bout between Brandon Royval versus Joshua Vaughn. I'm going with Brandon Royval. I think it's just a little too much to overcome, too big of a step up for Joshua Vaughn to just come up and beat literally a title contender and just would definitely be putting his name on the map big time with him only being 23 years old, like be a star in the making if he comes in here and has an impressive win over Brandon Royval, or if he even finishes him. But in this flyweight bout between Brandon Royval versus Joshua Vaughn, I'm going with Brandon Royval to win this. I think he's going to win by decision. All right. Now then, on to the co-main event of the of UFC 317, Topuria versus uh, Oliveira. And before I get too far ahead of me on this co-main event, so the flyweight bout between Brandon Royval versus Joshua Vaughn, it's a title eliminator bout, but I'm not 100% sure if it's a 5 round fight or not, 25-minute fight or not. All right, so we're bringing up the 25-minute fight, 5 minute round fight because we're on to the co-main event, which is a flyweight title bout between Alexander Pantoja, the champion, versus Kai Kara-France, the challenger. And this should be good. This should be a good one here, Co. So similar to Brandon Royval, Alexander Pantoja is with like the Muay Thai and the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu as well. And I mean they fought recently, so that shows you very similar. In styles is just Alexander Pantoja just a little bit better. But he is 5-0 in his last 5 fights. Uh, one of those was when he won the belt against Brandon Moreno, and then he's defended the flyweight championship 3 times since then against Brandon Royval, Steve Ursig, and Kaya Ascura, which was an impressive technical submission against a fighter from a champion from another organization. But before winning the belt and doing all that, he was on a pretty impressive winning streak anyways. He had won 7 fights, had seven straight wins here. So seven fight winning streak on top of having already defended the flyweight championship already. But in 34 fights, he has 29 wins with 5 losses. In the 29 wins, he has eight wins by knockout, 11 wins by submission, and 10 by decision. So he just shows you he's a full, like a true mixed martial artist where he can beat you anywhere. He can knock you out, he can submit you, or he can go the distance if he needs to. And he shows that he has a great chin and great submission defense as well, because in his 5 losses, he's never been knocked out. He's never been submitted, and he's just lost the five fights. He's lost the 5 fights by decision. 5 fights that he's lost have been by decision, and he hasn't lost a fight since July 19th, 2020, against Askar Askarov back in Abu Dhabi, back July 19th, 2020. So it's been a while since Alexander Pantoja has seen an L on his record. And he's 35, so I'm going off of his age there because we're coming off of Joshua Vaughn, who was so young. And then, so Kai France 32, so not a huge difference in age between these two. But Kai France, he's known for his Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but also like his striking. He's known for being like a knockout artist and having some devastating power for being a flyweight, only 125 pounds. And I'm this fight, these top 2 fights are kind of difficult for me to pick because I'm kind of a fan of Kai France. Like I love the Kiwi celebrations he has, the shrunken head Aborigine the sticking the tongue out celebrations and stuff that he has after like knocking people out, how he does that, like that stuff with like the shrunken head. Like I love that. And you've seen him doing like the warrior dances and stuff with his people from New Zealand. So pretty impressive. I'm just a fan. He's had done good with like building up his fame with not just his fighting resume, but also with fans liking him. And this makes it a little bit more difficult being kind of a fan of Kai France and a fan of Charles Oliveira with how I want these fights to go, like how I think they're going to go or how I want them to go. But anyways, we're talking about Kai France, about how he's like a knockout artist at the 125-pound range, which is so impressive. But he's 3-2 in his last 5 fights, and he was knocked out. He had fought for the interim belt before, and he's fought Alexander Pantoja before on the Ultimate Fighter and lost by decision. But in his last 5 fights, he's 3-2 with his most recent win being a TKO win over Steve Erceg, which was at the 404 mark of the first round in Perth, Australia, back at UFC 305, which that's what led up to getting this title shot, I imagine. And then he had lost 2 fights in a row before that against Marino and Amir Albaz. And he's had 37 fights with 25 wins, 11 losses, and one no contest. In the 25 wins, he's had 12 wins by knockout. So that's impressive for a 125-pounder. 3 wins by submission, 10 wins by decision, and then 11 losses, with three losses by knockout, 3 losses by decision, and 3 losses by knockout, 3 by submission, and 5 by decision, and 1 no contest. And so this is a hard fight for me to pick because it's more of like a fan. I can't leave my fandom behind because, like I said, I like that Kiwi celebration, the tongue sticking out celebration, the Aborigines, the shrunken head. So even though Alexander Pantoja has never been finished, never knocked out, never submitted, I am going with in this flyweight championship bout between Alexander Pantoja, the champion, versus Kai France, the challenger. I'm going with Kai France to get the knockout in this and become the new flyweight champion, UFC champion, and he's going to do that by knockout. And I think it's going to, if he's going to get the knockout, and if that's actually going to happen for 125 pounders, the most juice and most chance of them getting a knockout in a 5-round fight like this. It's pretty rare to see late knockouts from 125 pounders just because they don't have the power. So I'm assuming that if Kai Francis gets the knockout, it's going to be in the first round or early in the second. So in the flyweight bout between Alexander Pantoja, the champion, versus Kai Francis challenger, I'm going with Kai France to get the knockout either in the first or early in the second round. All right. Now then, on to the main event. We have a lightweight bout between Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira, and this is for the vacant UFC lightweight championship, so the 155-pound championship. So this is Ilia Topuria moving up weight class, moving up from bantamweight. Moving up from featherweight to lightweight. So moving up from 145 to 155, which I guess most people say they can't tell the difference. They still say he's as big as ever and big, and he thinks he's as strong as ever. I guess we'll have to see against someone like Charles Oliveira. I have to wait and see someone like Charles Oliveira that has a hard time making 155. Sometimes has had to vacate his belt before because of that, and has his whole team around him with him wrapped in towels and them all praying. Pretty serious stuff. Trying to see Charles Oliveira cut the last couple pounds that he needs to make weight, but be interesting to see size wise where Ilia Topuria matches up against Charles Oliveira. I believe Charles Oliveira will be bigger because Ilia Topuria is only like 5'7", and Charles Oliveira, he's almost 5'10", so only 3 inches taller, but still that's quite a bit. But Ilia Topuria, he's been just a straight up killer since he's come into the UFC and just the mixed martial arts in general. Since he's been in the UFC, he's on an 8-fight winning streak in the UFC, and then just in his whole career, he's 16-0, 16-fight winning streak. Obviously, won his last 5 fights, where he won the featherweight belt against Alexander Volkanovski, knocking him out, which was about as impressive a win you can get, and then turns it around and defends it against Max Holloway, knocking him down and knocking him out, being the first person to ever knock him out. So I guess just those 2 fights alone made it to where he's like a stalwart of the UFC featherweight championship group status, and trying to put people up on Rushmores and stuff of flyweights with just literally just two crazy impressive victories over Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway. But in his 16 matches, which Ilia Topuria, he has in his first 4 fights of his career, he won by submission because he's like a Greco-Roman wrestling, Georgian submission style. But since those four submission victories that he had, hell, he's just in the last his since he kind of made it to the UFC, he's been more of a knockout artist. So he's got the Greco-Roman wrestling, the Georgian wrestling, and submission game to where he's been just so detailed and so uh, smooth and precise in his striking game. His boxing is just so well rounded, and there's so much power and knockout ability coming from him. But he's a 16 matches with 16 wins, 0 losses. In the 16 wins, he has 6 wins by knockout, uh, 8 wins by submission, and 2 wins by decision. And then obviously he's never been knocked out, never been submitted, never lost by decision. So like like I said, these are the kind of matchups that you want to see. The only thing might be might be kind of something to highlight here is I guess he's like in the prime of his career at just 28 years old. Where Charles Oliveira, where I for some reason I'm thinking that Charles Oliveira is 28 years old or 38 years old, almost 40, but he's still only 35 years old. Won't be 36 till October. I guess it's just because he's been fighting in the UFC since he was 20, 21 years old, and he has like the most submission victories in the UFC and the most stoppages in the UFC. I'm trying to go back to how far it's been since he's fought. Yeah, his first fight in the UFC was Darren Elkins back on a fight night on August 1st, 2010. That's freaking crazy. So that's why this feels like he's been fighting in the UFC forever. I mean, maybe because he has been fighting for 15 years in the UFC, and since the top of his career, since about let's see, since yeah, since 2020 May 15th, 2021 against Michael Chandler has been about the only he's pretty much only been fighting for a championship bouts for title, either title eliminator bouts or for the belt is all Charles Oliveira has been fighting for. But in his last five fights, he's 3-2, and he's on a 1 fight winning streak, which I guess set him up for this title opportunity against Michael Chandler. Beat him by decision, and he had lost the previous title fight eliminator against Amon Sarukian, and then he's Benel Dariush. He extended his 20 fight finishes against him. And then Islam Makhachev, he lost the belt. It was for the vacant belt. So he's just all over the place. Like he lost the belt against Gaethje because he didn't make weight, even though he ended up winning the fight rear naked choke. And then pretty much, so Islam Makhachev beat him for the belt, and then has given up the belt since then. And then Benel Dariush fights on this card. So all these just all these crisscross and connect the dots with all these fights. But Charles Oliveira has had 46 fights in his career with 35 wins and 10 losses. In the 35 wins, he has 10 wins by knockout, 21 wins by submission, which that's just wild. Like you want to see if that's a mistake or something when you see that many. If that's like just a mess, a mistake putting that many, but 21 submissions, just 4 wins by decision. So with all of that, like hardly any of his fights really ever go to decision out of 46 of them. And then in the 10 losses, been knocked out 4 times, been submitted 4 times, and then just 2 losses by decision. So out of like all those fights, only 6 of them have ever gone to decision, and then just the one no contest. So my main thing here in picking this fight is just Ilia Topuria. Like how's he gonna look moving up in weight class? against Charles Oliveira, who fought at even higher weight classes, have fought at 170. So he's like a big lightweight. He's fighting a big lightweight. Yeah, he's fought welterweight, yeah, 170. So he's a big lightweight fighting Charles Oliveira. So be interesting to see how like the strength plays out, or who actually is the better striker, or who is better on the ground. But like I said, with the previous fight with Kai France and Alexander Pantoja, I'm kind of biased on these picks just because it's like a fan pick. I want him to win, just from fan perspective, wanting them to win. That would make the pay-per-view in itself a lot more enjoyable. But man, there's a lot of people that are red hot on Ilia Topuria, think that he can't be beaten. He wins this fight like he's already in the UFC Hall of Fame just from beating Alexander Volkanovski and beating uh, finishing Max Holloway. But like I said, I want to see him first at this weight class, and see him first as against one of the best lightweights of all time and just best finishers all time. Record proves it in Charles Oliveira. So in this lightweight bout between Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira, I think Ilia Topuria is probably gonna look great early on, and maybe even drop Charles Oliveira once or twice, maybe in the first or the second round. But I think Charles Oliveira will be able to persevere and come back. And we've seen that happen to Charles Oliveira, where he gets knocked down by what Justin Gaethje, or gets dropped by Michael Chandler, and then he comes back and just dominates them for the rest of the fight, or however long it remains. So I could see that. But if Charles Oliveira is able to make it out of those first two rounds, and maybe Ilia Topuria's knockout power, kind of eases up a little bit, I see Charles Oliveira starting with the ground game, and I think he's going to end up getting some type of submission over Ilia Topuria either late in the third or in the fourth and the fifth round. So in this lightweight championship bout for the vacant lightweight championship, we have Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira, and I'm going with Charles Oliveira. You know, I got to go with the veteran here, the legend here in Charles Oliveira. Ilia Topuria, he'll just automatically become a legend if he just walks through Charles Oliveira. Hell, if he just wins and becomes a champ, like he's trying to do, will be impressive enough. But like I said, moving up to lightweight, I know it's just 10 pounds, but Charles Oliveira, he's a big lightweight. He's fought at welterweight before, so I just want to see what Ilia Topuria looks like against a bigger fighter, because he was pretty big when he was fighting at featherweight. Like he was that's how he was dominating a lot of guys, because he was just more powerful and had such a strong knockout ability. But I don't think that'll be the case with him already being 3 inches shorter than Charles Oliveira. So in this lightweight bout between Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira, I'm going with Charles Oliveira. I think he's going to end up grinding this out, and in the later rounds, late in the third or in the fourth and the fifth, we'll see if Ilia Topuria hardly ever even had to go that long in any of his fights. I guess he had to go 5 rounds with Josh Emmett, but besides that, he hasn't really gone 5 rounds all that much. So I'm going with submission victory over Charles Oliveira. All right, so that's UFC 317. I'm pretty excited about it. There's like the way I'm predicting those top two fights it'll be a lot more exciting if Kai France becomes the new champion. It'll be a lot more exciting if Charles Oliveira becomes the new lightweight champion, Kai France flyweight. Just because just when it's kind of a coin flip for some of these, even when you look at the Vegas odds and stuff, I want to go with the fighters that I grew up watching, and the fighters that are under the underdog. You know, you want to see the underdog persevere sometimes. But I'm excited for this card. I don't think, just from going off of my picks already, I don't think it'll be as good as they turned out with the pick of my fighters and the method. I don't think it'll be as good as UFC 316, but I think a lot of these fights on UFC 17 are just a lot closer and just kind of coin flip. But that could make for a great a great card, and there's a lot of big time names there at the top of the card with Ilia, Topuria, Charles Oliveira, Alexander Pantoja, Renato Moicano, who just fought for the lightweight championship. So I'm excited. I'm ready for it, and hopefully we can keep our streak going. It'd be nice to say that we predicted 10 fights in a row correctly on the main card, but we'll just have to wait and see. But anyways, I think that's about all I have for you. So can I get a check, please?